Good morning. My name is Ngee Gaik Bee. I'm from Ngee Polytechnic, and on behalf of the Polytechnic, I'd like to welcome everybody here today. Thank you. Thank you for making it here, through the rain. And also a special thank you to our delegates here who are coming from overseas. Can we see who you are so that we can kind of like come up to you and welcome you? Welcome. I'm from the Center for Learning and Teaching Excellence, and these are our training rooms. So we're very happy to be partnering FeedbackFruits for this very first Inspire at Asia today. And to be frank, I'm not sure why I'm standing up here today. Max said, Ngee Gaik Bee, you got to give the first talk. It's like, do I have to? It's like, okay. So the first question was, what do I talk about? One of the areas that I'm working in as a staff developer here in Ngee Polytechnic is in assessment. I will not claim to be an expert in assessment, but of course, dealing with assessment day in, day out, you do have some thoughts about it. So what I'd like to do in this next hour is to share some of these thoughts about assessment, where it might be going, and how we might get there. Now, I'd like to make a big disclaimer that these are my own thoughts and my own views and do not necessarily represent the view of my institution. And I'm not claiming to be comprehensive, but rather taking a bit here and a bit there. And I hope that by the end of this session, you would have something that you could take back and think about. And it might be something that you disagree with. That's fine. It's basically thinking about assessment and talking about it, and looking to see how Gen AI, how technology plays a role in that. So, assessment, right? So we must always start with a quiz. Question, what's this? Can anybody identify it? Give a guess. Okay, I hear toilet. Someplace in China, very good. You can see the Chinese roofs over here. This one looks a lot like a toilet, right? It must be like a very big conference hall and then they go to the toilet. Any others? Is it a cemetery? It looks a bit like a cemetery, very gloomy, yes. Bathroom, can also, you can possibly have showers in there. And this is a Caucasian, so he'll be taller, but the average Chinese person at that time might have been shorter. Of course, you can see it's something very old. Any more? Rohui actually gave the answer right at the beginning. This was the site of the Chinese Imperial Examination. So all these are like little cells where they sit down there with their their brush and their paper, and they regurgitate everything that they memorized for years. Okay, so this was actually started in about the year the 6th century or so, in the Sui dynasty, and it went on with more refinements until in the Qing dynasty they abolished it in 1905. However, does this look familiar? Yes. It's just that you don't have, a roof over your head and maybe like a water supply and things like that. So I wonder, what has changed? Okay. One very interesting thing when we look at the Chinese imperial system was that the purpose of that imperial examinations was for entry to the civil service, to become a government official. And it was actually fit for purpose because the Chinese government officials were expected to be able to write, to be able to have a knowledge of the Chinese classics, and to have a similar approach. So it worked then. The question is it still working now? There's something for us to think about. So we know that, I think we're all educators here. We all know about constructive alignment. First of all, what are the outcomes that you want? how do we get there? What's the T&L approaches? And then how do we assess it? How do we know that they have achieved those outcomes? So when we look at the China imperial exam system, it worked because that was what they wanted. But of course, there were flaws because no system is perfect. After a while, only the rich were able to afford all the materials. Paper was not cheap. It was hand-pounded, brushes, ink, all these cost money. And of course, the rich could engage tutors. Does this sound familiar? Some things haven't changed. The other thing was that during the Qing dynasty, there were calls for reform because people said, all this rote learning and memorization, I'm sure they didn't use those words, but that's the idea that they got. All this rote learning and memorization stifles creativity and scientific innovation. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why it was abolished. But it has persisted in one form or another all around the world, right? Again, did the Chinese invent it? I'm not sure, but they invented a lot of things, so perhaps. So, today, are these still fit for purpose? Are our learning outcomes still the same, or have they changed? Okay, so I have a question for you. I need some audience interaction early in the morning. Please scan the Mentimeter code. And just wait a couple of minutes. Okay. So, think about your students. What is one critical skill or competency that your students need by the time they graduate? Okay, you can have up to 3 entries in 1 or 2 or 3 words. Growth mindset, collaboration is coming very big, gratitude, Kim Yam, you're absent. Okay, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, empathy, all right, I think there is a consensus. There are many things over here, but they are all important. And our students need them when they graduate, when they go out to work, when they function as a member of society. And even now, when they are in the institute, they need to have all these to succeed as a student. So why I'm so confident that we'll have some is because I think back in your institute, you all have these goals in one way or another. No one is going to say that, yeah, we don't need, mutual respect, we don't need gratitude, but they're all important. So let's take a look and see what the World Economic Forum has to say about this. Where's my mouse? Okay, so where are we going? What do our students need when they graduate? So the OECD has come up with the future of education and skills, and they had 3 sets of skills: cognitive and metacognitive, social and emotional, practical and physical. If you look at it, it actually falls very nicely into the 3 domains of learning for Bloom, right? You have your cognitive, you have your affective, and you have your psychomotor. Or, another way to put it, your knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Right? And hey, guess what? It's the same list that you came up with just now, collectively in 2 minutes. So this is not something new, right? And already, this says 2030, but this was put together and published in 2019, 5 years ago. Has anything major happened since this was published in 2019? Yes, right? Yes! Ta-da! I don't even have to say what this is. COVID changed the landscape of learning and of work tremendously. And we are still feeling the effects of it. Back in 2019, Zoom was a word when you said that a word that you used when you wanted to go fast, right? Now Zoom has become a verb. Hey, chicken, after we Zoom, huh? Right? So it's gone into the regular parlance. Things have changed. And because of that also, now everybody had to move to remote learning. In 2019, how many of us had ever taught online? We don't believe in it. It won't work. I want to see my students. And then suddenly everybody was online. We educators had to learn a lot of new skill sets very quickly. So did our students. We weren't perfect. I still remember, do you remember the story about the lecturer who talked to himself for 2 hours? I'm very surprised that there were still students there who were patiently sitting there looking at him for 2 hours, not knowing what he was saying, until finally somebody managed to alert him that, hey, you're on mute. So we learn along the way, right? We start by learning mistakes, but we get better because we had to persist, because learning still had to go on. We had remote work. Now we still have work from home. Anybody forced to go to the office 5 days a week? No one, right? Oh, you are. So sad. Yeah. So some companies are now insisting that, I want to see your face. I want to see your bum on the chair every day on the work day. But we still do have work from home. We have remote work. So take a look at FeedbackFruits. The company is based in the Netherlands. Max, who is presumably on his way here, is in the Netherlands. Talula is based in Indonesia and flies around. Eugenie, who is somewhere outside, is based in Taiwan. And when I need help support, I'm confident I can get it, not at Netherlands hours, but Singapore hours, because I'm talking to Noor, who is in Malaysia. Right? So the world has opened up, globalized. So we need cross-cultural skills. We need virtual communication skills, virtual collaboration skills. So that list has actually increased. Anything else major happened in the last 5 years? Yeah, Gen AI. Before that, people were talking about AI and saying, it's a very long time in the future. But on the 30th of November, 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT to the general public. And this is one big driver of transformation, because if we don't keep up, the students will get there before us. Right? And at first we said, never mind lah. Gen AI only can do words. They can't come up with pictures. And look, this was generated by Gen AI. And all I said was concept of artificial intelligence. And this was generated using Microsoft Designer, which is available to everyone with a Microsoft account. So you don't have to pay for it, like for some of the better apps. Now we know that Gen AI can come up with video. So, do we want to ask students to produce videos? Gen AI, don't worry, it's bad at math. Now it's good at math. So sometimes when I think, how do we outrun Gen AI? I think, don't worry about outrunning Gen AI. Gen AI will catch up and go in front of you. So then how does it come into the picture for learning and, more importantly, for assessment? And I think that's the worry of many educators and many educational institutions. So when we look at this, actually it's still the same. Our students still need this. In fact, more than ever, they need the social and emotional skills, the practical and physical skills. What GenAI has done is that it has helped us with this, right? But students still need self-regulation. Students still need that creative and critical thinking, because GenAI has not reached the creativity of humans. It can combine, it can remix, it can synthesize. We still are the ones who come up with something new, something out of the box. Okay? So let's go to the World Economic Forum. You know, every few years they publish the top 10 skills, the top 10 jobs, and so on. So this was published in 2023, and you can see the list here: analytical thinking, critical thinking, resilience, motivation, self-awareness, curiosity. These are the words that you put up, right? So they're nothing new. What's going to change? When businesses were asked, what are your skill priorities for 2027? AI and big data came up. Hi, Max. And leadership and social influence. But you realize that here's your hard skills, here's your soft skills. You still need all these things to become a whole person. So I have another interaction question for you. Are we developing and addressing these skills and competencies? So we all agree they're important, but what are we doing about them? Okay, so I'm going to move to the next question. I hope this works. Right, so does your institution develop these skills and competencies? Do you or your institution assess these skills and competencies? To what extent? Okay, we'll wait for a couple more. Right, so over here you can see the spread. Interestingly, we have some here. No, we don't actually assess them. Many of us do try to develop them, but the assessment is lagging behind. Not surprisingly, how do you assess creativity? How do you assess resilience? These are complex competencies that you can't answer with a sit-down exam or an MCQ. Unless, of course, you're asking about the theory. But the actual skill, the actual attribute, harder to assess. So how do we do that? So, of course, I think I expected that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we get there? And I have to say that this next section, I had help from GenAI. Okay, so I'm declaring, making a statement of transparency now, Paul. Okay, how do we get there? Some thoughts. Whoops. Okay, so in the immediate future, what are we doing in our classroom to actually develop and assess these? Okay. What should assessment look like? How can we reimagine it? And how can we reimagine it in a realistic way that can be implemented, feasible, doesn't kill us? Because all of us have so much work to do and we're all busy people. How do we bring our faculty in, our colleagues? Okay. Sorry, it's a bit light here, but you can also look at the screens on the side, which I think has a little bit better contrast. Try out something, but make sure that you clear it with your authorities, right? So that everybody knows what's going on and are clear what's happening. So this is what we can already do in the short term, in a small way in our class. It need not be graded, but it needs to be brought up. It needs to be mentioned. Medium-term goals. What I realized over the years is that we're very good at reviewing and redesigning our curriculum. No problem. But assessment seems to lag behind. We're still assessing the same way we used to, by and large. Okay? And that may be fine if it's assessing what it's meant to assess. But now if you bring all these other skills and competencies in the picture, it becomes more complex. Are we assessing those, or are we hoping that it will happen on its own, or are we taking it for granted that, the students know how to collaborate? So then that's where the assessment policies, the quality assurance frameworks need to come into place, and perhaps partnership development as well. Partnership development with other stakeholders, maybe across institutions, so that we learn together and then we develop new systems together. And of course, with technology companies as well. In the long term, it's about cultural transformation, it's about systemic change management, it's about continuously innovating. You saw what happened in the last 5 years. This is going to be, a state of flux as time goes by, right? And then, what's the impact? Does it actually make a difference? Does it move the needle? Okay. So I'm going to take the first point, which was reimagining assessment. So some of the things that assessment people around the world have been talking about this is not new. This is something that's been around for the last 10, 15 years. Authenticity and real-world relevance. How can we make tasks that are meaningful and more authentic for our learners? How can we integrate technology and digital tools? How can we provide continuous and formative feedback? Because that's how students learn. And how do we help students to develop evaluative judgment? So for each of these, there's a big body of work. For today's talk, I won't go into them, but if you want to find out more, do come and look for me. So for example, evaluative judgment, David Baut at Deakin and his colleagues have been doing a lot of work in this area, as well as in terms of the continuous and formative feedback. So again, most of the things that I show you will not be new. Maybe one or two, and I'll share some videos on those. Okay, so we have industry partnered projects, interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary projects, and I'm sure that you're doing that already. So the question is, when you assess these projects, are you also assessing for those things like resilience, like collaboration, like communication, apart from the content and disciplinary knowledge that you want them to have, right? There's competency-based assessments. So later on, we will have a presentation by by NYP, who's going to talk about competency-based learning. So go and find out how she's going to assess her students. And I'm going to talk about interactive oral assessment because I think that's something that may not be so familiar to many of us. And integration of technology. Of course, the big one is the Gen AI integration. We have a lot of work in Gen AI for teaching and learning. How does Gen AI come in for assessment? Simulation-based assessment, virtual reality assessment, this is where Gen AI has potential. So we already have those, you know that when people now apply for jobs, their first cut interview may be with a Gen AI. So how about for learning? When a student nurse needs to interact with a patient, can we have such an interview board, to kind of like be the patient? And normally it's done in class. You have 4 groups, 5 groups, and then you do it one group at a time. Students don't get a lot of practice. But with Gen AI, their possibilities are enormous. But that will be for formative assessment. Summative assessment, not so clear-cut yet, okay? Virtual reality is another one, but that one needs more hardware. But I think the School of Health Sciences in Ngee Poly has been using Oculus and so on. Yep. Digital portfolios, I think I don't have to talk about that, and AI-assisted feedback systems. How can that come into play? And I think Rohui, after my talk in this room, will be talking about using AI to analyze feedback that students give on the FeedbackFruits group member evaluation tool. Another one that I will cover a little bit is programmatic assessment, and then peer and self-assessment. So peer and self-assessment, we all agree is good, but we worry, do students know how to give feedback? Can they give good feedback? What about the impact on the person who's getting the feedback if it's very harsh or it's not tactful? So that's where I think technology platforms, that's why you can see it's purple, such as FeedbackFruits, can come in and help with the admin backend and even provide AI coaching to the students when they give feedback. So again, I want to cover two of those bullet points just now. One is interactive oral assessment, and the other is programmatic assessment. These are just 2-minute videos each. It's not meant to give you a primer on it, but really to give you an idea of what it's about, and you can go off and then find out more about it. And if you're interested in it, we could talk. And this is not something that's being done at Ngee. Is it something that's realistic? Not sure. We'll find out. This is
Interactive orals are genuine, unscripted two-way conversations designed to verbally assess students in an authentic workplace or professional scenario that synthesizes and applies acquired learning and skills. To support use of interactive orals, DCU formed a collaboration with Griffith University Australia, who have over 6 years' experience in research and design in this space.
One thing I'll say about the interactive oral is that it's slightly different, obviously, than a normal assessment process. It's a little bit more challenging at the beginning, but there's help from a community of practice and experts internationally, and it's very creative.
What I enjoyed most about the interactive oral is it didn't feel like a high-pressure exam situation. Rather, I felt like I was talking to a business associate rather than a traditional examiner.
The main challenge for me was getting the rubric right. Initially, my rubric was really detailed, and it still needed to be detailed, but it was a little bit all over the place in terms of structure. So I had to go back to it and tweak it and make sure that the structure of it followed the flow of the conversation of the oral. And in fact, I let the students know that there'd be a particular structure, and I just made sure to sort of have that then ordered in my rubric like that.
For me, the principal benefit was that I was able to showcase a wide variety of knowledge in a manner that a traditional exam wouldn't have allowed me to do so.
I did this type of assessment because I wanted to get away from traditional type of assessments. I wanted to simulate a real, authentic scenario where students, they will be discussing competently contemporary issues on sustainable aviation, while at the same time I do assess their competence and expert knowledge in the subject matter, while I create a stress-free environment for them.
It allowed me to showcase my learning by placing me in a fictitious real-world scenario where I needed to be a subject matter expert. Not only did I need to know the information, but I also needed to communicate it effectively and authentically, and also to back it up when challenged on it.
So the use of the interactive oral gave me great confidence and felt like I really was prepared to go into the classroom to use the technique, and also I got to participate and had the opportunity to engage in really informal and professional dialogic conversation.
If you are interested in learning more about this work or in joining our community of practice, please feel free to contact me.
Okay, so this was a video. I picked it because it's 2 minutes long and it's very clear, by Dublin City University. But they referenced Griffith University, which started this whole notion of interactive oral assessments. I had the opportunity to go to Griffith University earlier this year, and I asked a lot of questions like, is this scalable? Is it a lot of workload? And so on. And they addressed all these questions. So if it's something you're interested in, we can talk more and find out more and learn more about this. In Singapore, SIT is doing it for their nursing degree. That's the one that I know of. So there are experts who are actually practicing it in Singapore itself. Let's move on to the next slide. Let's get out of this. Escape. Okay. Just 1 minute. Okay, the next thing that I want to introduce is actually programmatic assessment. And here's another video. If it pops up. There we go.
In daily life, people are often assessed. At school, for example, when given grades for tests, or at work to decide if there is a reason for promotion. The toolbox to assess any part of competence is well filled. Methods are readily available. Yet each individual method of assessment has severe limitations, both statistically and educationally. Not a single method can do it all, but together they can. Therefore, we should stop optimizing single assessment methods and rather optimize the program of assessment as a whole. This can be done by programmatic assessment. In programmatic assessment, each individual moment of assessment is considered to be a single data point, never leading to a decision to pass or fail. Any single assessment should provide rich information that is meaningful as feedback to the learner. Decision-making over a learner's progression is taken based on multiple data points. The number of data points depends on the importance of the decision. Very high-stakes decisions, such as a promotion or a certification, need to be based on many data points. Any method of assessment can be used in a particular data point. The choice of method depends on the educational justification for using it at that moment in time and its fit to the rest of the assessment program. Feedback on the assessment is used to guide learning. This is strongly promoted when a dialogue on all feedback and other learning information is created. Coaches help to guide learners in the use of feedback in their personal development. Programmatic assessment gathers ongoing rich assessment information on a learner until sufficient information is available to make a robust overall decision. It can be applied to learning in schools and in workplace learning. It is an answer to making assessment more meaningful for learning, while at the same time having solid evidence to make robust decisions about learners. Are you interested? Look on Google Scholar for some interesting papers on programmatic assessment.
All right, hold on. I'll just have to get out of this again. So programmatic assessment actually started from the field of medicine. Started from the medical school, just like problem-based learning started from medical school. And it may not be doable for everybody, but certainly we can look at what are the ideas behind it, what is the concept that led to it, and is this something that we can use, right? Maybe not in the immediate future, because this is something that requires at least the whole course or larger ecosystem. Again, this is not something that I'm saying as an institutional stance, but rather some of the trends that we are observing across assessment in higher education. And I'm bringing it here for you to look at it and to consider. Some of you may already be doing it, so we'd welcome you to share later on during the tea break or lunch. But for some of you, it may be something new. So again, it's about how do we get there? What are different ways in which we can reimagine our assessment? But now I want to come to a specific topic, which is Gen AI and assessment. The elephant in the room, better to just talk about it straight away. How many of you think that Gen AI is a threat to assessment? Hands up, please. Nobody. Wow, you're not concerned about students cheating. You're not worried whether the assignment was done by the student or by Gen AI. Awesome, these people here are all very enlightened. How many of you think that Gen AI is an opportunity? Okay, great. Looks like everybody here has a very positive view. Maybe that's why you're sitting here today, right? I just wanted to check, just to make sure your hands are still working. But obviously, that means when you say it was a threat, it's like, okay, there are threats, but how can we redesign assessment? How can we redesign the learning intentions so that it can be a help, right? instead of something that we need to worry about, whether students are cheating, how to detect their cheating, and then it becomes an arms race, and you'll never win. And it's easier and easier to do that now. So what should assessment look like? What should we be assessing? Okay. So again, this one is from UNESCO's guidance for generative AI in education and research. It's a 30-page document. I just extracted a few bullet points for you to make it doable in 1 minute. But the links are here, and you can also Google it. And this was published in 2023. Okay, so there are quite a few things that it said, of course, in 30 pages. But two that I just want to mention would be ethical issues. These are not resolved yet, and I think it's something that we have to tackle as we go along. The other one is our learning outcomes have to change. Do we still need students to memorize stuff? Some things, yes, foundational knowledge and skills. But we actually also need to teach students how to use Gen AI. What are the higher order thinking skills that we can now look at and work on now that students are able to get information, synthesize information, even get some analysis of information in the first cut, right? One question I would say is, how is it being done in the workplace? How is it being used? And that's how we need to prepare our students as well. And sometimes maybe our students are at the leading edge. When they go out to industry, is industry ready for them? How do they translate that into the workplace, particularly for small and medium enterprises, right? So there's the vocational skills that's needed to work with AI, how to develop, operate, and work with AI tools. I just wanted to take the part about our learning outcomes need to change and how we can respond to Gen AI for assessment. We do have challenges. It can be a tool, but it can also be a tool in the hands of students for cheating. Of course, most of our students are good students, but we do have a few of those bad eggs. Or we have students who, in the rush for time, no skills, they will use Gen AI and they rely on it, but has learning happen, right? So we have things like the authenticity verification, we have academic integrity concerns. So I mentioned just now the call to action. How do we prepare students for workplaces that are increasingly AI integrated? How do we develop our students' AI literacy? And before that, how do we develop our own AI literacies? How do we review our learning outcomes? How do we redesign assessment? And then how do we integrate AI into assessment appropriately? Okay. And that brings us to the responsible and ethical use of AI that we and our students need to be aware of and practice. Talking about assessment redesign, can we integrate AI into assessments? But not only integrate AI into assessments, can we assess our students' AI literacy? For example, prompt engineering, rubbish in, rubbish out. How do we get them to write good prompts to be able to achieve what they want? How do we evaluate that, you know? And instead of just taking the AI output and considering that as gospel truth, how do we get them to evaluate AI output? So you're developing critical thinking as well, right? And how do we have collaborative AI human projects? So again, AI as your co-creator, AI as your assistant. And we can see that already because now in education, AI can be used as a teaching assistant. It can help us to come up with our curriculum faster. It can even now generate slides. It can generate visuals. It can generate videos. But we have to be the ones to say whether or not it is appropriate. And I think one of my colleagues last week said something which I've just forgotten. Okay, never mind, it'll come back. Right, but then how do we then assess students? How do we make sure what's their input versus what's AI's input? Okay, so all this is just talk. Talking is easy, doing is hard. So we have a wonderful colleague here with us today. She's from the National Institute of Early Childhood Development, which one branch of which sits in Ngee Polytechnic at the School of Humanities and Interdisciplinary Studies. Her name is Shron Sugumaran, and she has used AI in her assessments to get students to use the AI and to also use AI to help the teachers. So I'm going to invite Shron to come and share with us.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. So let me introduce myself. I am Shron from the National Institute of Early Childhood Development. What we do is we train preschool teachers, right? So we train preschool teachers to be. We reside in 4 campuses around Singapore, and the campus that I work in is obviously at Ngee Polytechnic, right? So AI is an inevitable truth that, as Gaik Bee mentioned just now, it started to surface a lot when COVID hit, and also when ChatGPT and all those other tools came along the way, right? But did AI only start in 2020, 2021? AI was invented in 1955, and AI is actually all around us. I would say that AI has only made its foray into our educational setting in recent years, but it's not new to the world. Right now, AI has a very negative impression. People think that AI is a threat, but AI is not a threat. AI can be a tool. And that is something. AI is a threat. It's a tool. It's not a threat. And that's something that we want to inculcate in our students, in ourselves, and also in our faculty, right? I'll just keep going, okay? Yes. So over here at NIEC NP, what we wanted to do was to change the narrative that we have about AI, right? And as I go through some of my experiences, I would like to invite all of you to think about this. What is your current narrative about artificial intelligence in your own teaching philosophy, in your own classroom, in your department, or maybe even in your own educational landscape, locally or internationally? Yeah? So the first issue that we had was assessments. We trained preschool teachers, right? But a lot of our assessments were written assessments. Are our preschool teachers expected to write essays after essays when they go out to the industry? No. Yet, a lot of our assessments were written assessments. Some of our assessments we felt could have had more authenticity, right? We want to have industry partners' involvement. We want to provide our students with assignments that would benefit them and the industry in the long run. And another issue that we faced was our students' agency. Many of them saw assessments as assessments, you know? So how are you coming along with your assignment? Yeah, never mind, I'll just do it the day before it's due. It's just an assignment anyway. We don't like that idea. We don't like having our students not being motivated about their assignments. We want our students to be encouraged and motivated to finish their assignments. We had students who turned to AI, but with a lack of prudence. So we keep saying that our students they're all good, right? But we do have students who turn to AI for all the wrong reasons. There was also a lack of tech and AI literacy in our students. We come with this misconception that our teenagers are tech savvy. But are they? Some of my students don't know how to insert a footer into a Word document, right? So AI literacy, that idea of young people being savvy, they're digital natives. Yes, they are digital natives, but are they truly savvy? And the last thing was, our students didn't know where to start in finding resources to aid them with their assignments. So those were some of the challenges that we identified within our assessments itself. I developed a module that is currently running. It's called the Infant and Toddler Learning Environment, and it prepares our students to work with infants and toddlers, right? And for this assignment, which I'll be showing you very briefly, I allow the students to use AI in the draft stage. So I have a template for them, and there is a template for the draft and a template for the final. So I tell my students that AI can be used in the draft stage. You want to ask ChatGPT? Go ahead. You want to ask Perplexity, you want to ask any tool, go ahead. But you must credit the ideas, okay? So they did turn to AI. Then I told them, but you cannot just rely on AI. You have to use one other reading or article to find more ideas. So there was an opportunity for them to not just turn to Google, turn to the World Wide Web, turn to ChatGPT, but to also force them in some way to look for articles that are beneficial to their learning. Their analysis from AI and the article should still be triangulated with their own perspectives. I don't want my students to just be putting out ideas of other people. You also have to be your own person, and you also have to have your own ideas. So we encourage them to put that into their draft as well. Now, mind you, the draft is not graded. And that is why it encourages them to go and use AI, encourages them to go and read articles to put in their own thoughts. Their draft would then be shared with an early years educator in the childcare center they are attached to for them to get feedback on their ideas. And lastly, their final analysis and recommendations will have to eventually be crafted by the students based on the feedback, based on the resources they have curated in their draft assignment. So what is my assignment? My assignment is on supporting infants and toddlers' social emotional needs. I give my students 3 scenarios to choose from. Scenario number 1 is on biting, toddlers who bite. Scenario number 2 is on toddlers who cannot sit still, they're constantly walking around. And scenario number 3 is on toddlers who just cannot let go of their comfort toy. The moment you take it away, they scream and they cry and they just cannot go on for the day. So they choose a scenario, they analyze, why is the child behaving this way, right? And for many of them, they don't have experience with young children. They don't have enough experience. So they ask AI, then they ask the articles, and then they put in some of their own thoughts. So they come up with a draft analysis. Right after that, they will also put in some draft guidance strategies. Now, if the child is biting because blah, 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 can I resolve it by blah, 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 blah? So even for the guidance strategies, they can ask AI, they can turn to credible resources and also some of their own thoughts. This draft is what they bring to the childcare center and say, hey, Miss Lim, I'm working on this assignment and this is a scenario, these are some of my thoughts, what do you think? So they get the feedback of an early years educator who has had experience working with young children. Now that they've gotten all of this feedback and resources done up, they will meet us for a consultation when they come back to school. And right after that, they finalize it themselves. What's the whole point of it? So many levels of information. But that is exactly what it is. It is just information. I always tell my students, artificial intelligence is called artificial intelligence for a reason. It's artificial. The real intelligence resides here in you, right? So through getting all the information from multiple sources, they exercise prudence on what I can take and what I should not take. They exercise wisdom on deciding on that one recommended strategy for that particular child's behavior. Will it help them when they go out to the industry? Yes. So that is how I incorporated AI into the assignment, which is currently running. And through that, the first lesson I want to inculcate in my students and maybe even my faculty is resourcefulness. You are surrounded by resources in this 21st century. How do I make use of the resources? Second area was providing feedback. This is for my fellow colleagues. So I don't just want to use AI with my students, I also want to empower my colleagues to feel courageous enough to try to use AI. Right now, the one narrative I keep hearing is, I'm so old already. I can't learn fast. I can't keep up with how technology is advancing. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do it at their own pace. So what was the challenge we were facing with the faculty? At NIEC, NP, Ngee Ann Polytechnic, we have a very large cohort. Not as big as nursing, but we have something like 400 over students, and marking can be a nightmare. I'm sure those of you who have large classes, you understand the nightmare of marking, especially if the deadlines are really short. So, number one, when we are marking and providing feedback for our students, we realize that sometimes our feedback may not be suitable to the needs of the cohort. Sometimes we realize that some learners need differentiated feedback. You can't write the feedback the same way for all 450 students. We realize that for some feedback, it might not be very reader-friendly, especially if I'm providing feedback at 2 a.m. in the morning. We realize that sometimes the quality of feedback might not have been standardized. We realize that we cannot keep giving feedback. Some of my students actually say, Ms. Shron, you shouldn't just be giving feedback. We hope that you could also tell us how we can improve and what are some areas that we've done well and we can do even better. It's a good thing, happy problem. And the last most inevitable thing that we can mostly relate to would be the exhaustion that you get from marking. It is exhausting providing feedback to 450 students if your assignments are all written assignments. So we tried using AI to curate feedback that colleagues can turn to in the event their brain is saturated. But we did tell faculty that AI can make mistakes. So we did tell them that when you use AI for this, make sure you check the feedback. That's number one. Number two, they will still need to annotate the physical assignment. AI is not marking and providing scores. AI is giving a first cut feedback for them that they can use to edit and provide a final feedback. But they still annotate the papers, right? Colleagues were encouraged to try different sites, but of course we tell them that there is a privacy concern, so you have to be careful which sites you choose because these are students' assignments. I'm going to demonstrate very quickly a tool that after many iterations we managed to come up with. So some of us might be familiar with this platform. This is called Microsoft Teams, right? And our colleagues at CLTE, one of them is not here today, but he very kindly helped us to develop a built-in feedback assistant. So I'm going to quickly run through how we used it. Okay. So once you open the built-in function, it will say type upload to start. So you'd see that I typed upload. And right after that, it would say, okay, later on, you will need to upload your marking rubric and your student submissions. I accept DOCX, PDF, and TXT files. Once uploaded, I'll continue the conversation. So then it gives me a folder to upload everything. In the interest of time, I'll not demonstrate the uploading of the files into the folder. So once I upload everything into the folder, it will say, okay, give me some time. Let me read your assignments. So it will read through and it will say, okay, I've read everything that you've given me. Just to let you know, I've deleted all your files as well. So whatever you uploaded, it will get deleted within a minute, right after the AI assistant reads it, right? So then I give the prompt. So I would say, okay, using the marking rubric, provide feedback on samples 1, 2, and 3. It must have 2 strengths, 1 improvement, and omit no grades, no scoring, because that should be done by the lecturer. And this is the kind of feedback we get. Still rather lengthy, yeah? Not all our students might read that entire paragraph of information. Knowing my students, I tell the prompt, I give another prompt, edit the above feedback to include developmental appropriateness, and summarize the feedback into bullet points. So we get feedback like this. Now, am I going to copy and paste everything? No, because AI doesn't know my student. I know my student, right? What we do that has been helpful is we copy and paste this into an Excel spreadsheet that becomes our feedback bank. And when my mind goes blank, I turn to the bank to get some inspiration for certain scripts that might be difficult to provide feedback on, or if feedback has been too saturated. So that's how we used AI for providing feedback. Back to the slides. And the second lesson I wanted to inculcate in my faculty and even hopefully my students in the long run is courage. We might not know how to use many of the tools out there, but all you need is that small little bit of courage to start trying. Are my colleagues a bit more courageous now? I would say yes. So it's always pedagogy before technology. And when I arrived, FeedbackFruits, they gave us stickers and some nice goodies, right? And this caught my eye. I believe all of you have it. The sticker says, pedagogy before technology. We feel very scared that technology is going to take over us and our jobs will become redundant. It will not become redundant if you remember that pedagogy is placed before technology. It's always pedagogy first. Technology is a tool, will never be a threat. And that's all. Thank you very much, Ms. Gaik Bee.
Thank you very much, Ron. You can see that the short-term actions are there. She reimagined the assessment. She brought in the faculty development and support. It's still it's current, it's happening right now. The students are out there right now. And before she did it, of course, she cleared it with the authorities in NIEC. And you can see that industry was involved, because one of the points of feedback that the student was supposed to get from is actually from the childcare supervisor, because the students happen to be doing their practicum in the same semester. Was there integration of Gen AI in the assessment? Yes. And then the AI-assisted feedback systems as well. And in terms of Gen AI integration, there was development of the faculty AI literacy, student AI literacy, and the ethical and responsible use of Gen AI came through very clearly as well. So you can see how you can take some of these pointers and put them together to look at your particular learning outcomes, your particular assessment, and apply that in what we get students to do, to learn, and for us to also see how well they have achieved the learning outcome. So this brings us to my last slide. Question: should we then do away with exams? Okay, I'll give you the answer. The answer is no, because there are still certain fundamental, foundational knowledge which you want to assess in person in an invigilated or high security kind of a setting, right? But it shouldn't be the only way. In fact, with Gen AI, what some institutions were doing was everyone had gone happily into e-exams and e-tests because of COVID. And with Gen AI, everyone said, come back here. I want to see you seated right in front of me, and I'm going to march past you every 5 minutes to make sure that you're not cheating, right? So again, different tools, different assessment tools suited for different assessment purposes. But what are the purposes? That's what I'd like us to reflect on today. And thank you very much for your attention.